We have power to exclude and to deport certain immigrants who do not come up to a certain standard, either physically, intellectually, or morally, and whom we deem to be unworthy of Canadian citizenship. We have power to deport Hindus or anyone else if we are of opinion that they come within any of the classes I have referred to. In the early 1900s, South Asians began to migrate to Canada. At the time of Laurier's words, as many as 5,000 had arrived in British Columbia. One of Canada's first gurdwaras, established by the Khalsa Divan Society, was built in Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. The Gurdwara, a Sikh place of worship, was a spiritual, political, and social hub, and a symbol that the South Asian community was growing. Many Canadians felt concerned about the growing number of immigrants entering the country. Regulations were designed to keep South Asians from immigrating to Canada, but limiting their entry outright was a complex issue. Legally, Canada could not ban immigration from India, as both countries were part of the British Empire. So the government created a loophole. The continuous journey regulation meant immigrants had to make a non-stop trip to Canada from their country of origin, or else they would be denied entry. At the time, no ship could make the continuous journey from India to Canada. It was impossible. While the existing South Asian community in BC rallied and challenged the racist regulations, they faced obstacles at every turn. But in 1914, a leader emerged to challenge the status quo on a very public stage. Baba Gurditt Singh was a Punjabi businessman. He heard of the difficulty his fellow Sikhs had encountered trying to emigrate to Canada. He chartered a steamship, the Komagata Maru, to make the voyage and sold tickets to his countrymen. In April 1914, Gurditt Singh and 150 passengers set sail from Hong Kong. Stopping in China and Japan, the ship picked up more hopeful immigrants along the way. A total of 376 people headed to Vancouver on that ship. Almost all were men, except for 2 women and 4 children, and almost all were Punjabi. After 2 long months at sea, the Komagata Maru approached Burrard Inlet in the heart of downtown Vancouver. When he chartered the Komagata Maru, Gurditt Singh didn't just want to help his fellow passengers reach Canada, he wanted to launch a direct challenge against racist Canadian immigration laws. On May 23, 1914, the Komagata Maru dropped anchor and was greeted by unwelcoming immigration officials. When the passengers were told that they would not be granted entry into Canada since their ship hadn't made a continuous journey, an 8-week standoff with the Canadian government began. The South Asian community in BC quickly organized, forming the Shore Committee. Led by Bhag Singh and Hussein Rahim, the Shore Committee raised funds to hire a lawyer, J. Edward Bird, to negotiate on the passengers' behalf. Meanwhile, the conditions on the ship grew unbearable.
ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਹਾਲਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ? ਪਿਛਲੇ 3 ਦਿਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪੀਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਿਆ। ਤੁਸੀਂ 3 ਵਾਰੀ ਦਿਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਜ ਕੇ ਖਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਤਕਲੀਫ ਨਹੀਂ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ।
The passengers' requests for food and water were largely ignored by Canadian officials until conditions on the ship became so intolerable, they were forced to act. Determined to uphold its exclusionary immigration laws, the government refused to back down, despite the Shore Committee's best efforts. The ship was repeatedly asked to return to India as soon as possible. The legal battles eventually failed. Lawyer J. Edward Bird was subject to so many threats from the white community that he was eventually forced to flee Vancouver for several weeks. It became clear that there was no way the passengers of the Komagata Maru would be allowed entry into Canada. The Shore Committee mobilized to secure funds and supplies to get the ship safely back to India. Tensions between the government, passengers, and the committee continued to rise over the 8 weeks the ship was docked. They came to a head in the middle of the night on July 19th. 125 police officers and 35 immigration officials attempted to board the Komagata Maru and drive it out of the inlet by force. The passengers, despite having been imprisoned on the ship for weeks, fought back with whatever they could find, driving the officers back to shore. 2 days later, the Navy arrived. Crowds of onlookers gathered on the shore, and some boarded their own boats to get a closer look at the starving passengers imprisoned aboard the ship. Only a handful of the passengers, who had all previously lived in the country, were granted entry into Canada. In the early hours of July 23rd, exactly 2 months after its arrival, the Komagata Maru and its passengers were forced to leave Canadian waters. For many, the return to India would not be a happy homecoming. When the ship finally docked in Budge near Kolkata, passengers were met with force. The British government in India was falsely claiming that what happened in Canada was an act of rebellion against the British Empire. When the passengers left the ship for the first time in 6 months and tried to enter to the city, the British police opened fire, killing 20 passengers and injuring 9. They arrested several others. Baba Gurditt Singh escaped the massacre and lived in hiding until 1921, when he too was imprisoned. For decades, South Asian Canadians kept the movement going and continued to fight for their rights. It wasn't until 1967 that anti-South Asian immigration regulations were abolished entirely. In 2016, the Canadian government officially apologized for the events surrounding the Komagata Maru, 102 years after its arrival. The story of the Komagata Maru and the activism of Canada's Sikh and South Asian communities helped pave the way for greater equality in Canada.